The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand Karl Ludwig Joseph Maria in 1914 is directly responsible for the creation and subsequent internet impact of Matt from Wii Sports. Yes, you heard me correctly. Before we get into that though, my name is Mr. Scar, and if you want to see more crazy video documentaries and essays like this, please hit the like and subscribe button, as this is my first video. So without further ado, let's get into it. When Serbian Gavrilo Princip walked through the streets of Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, he had no idea of the lasting consequences of what he was about to do. Enraged by the treatment of the Balkan people and desiring to unite the Slavs once again into one country, he aimed his gun at the head of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and pulled the trigger, killing him and his wife. What followed was a mess of tangled alliances, nationalism, and eventually a world war. Within days of the assassination, Germany and Austria-Hungary had declared war on Serbia. This roped numerous other countries into the fray, solely based on alliances and treaties made in past conflicts. Russia, Britain, Italy, France, most of Europe, and eventually America were forced to fight in a war that they had no desire to, all because of a single shot. These conflicts escalated quickly, and within months, World War I was in full force. While World War I was one of the deadliest wars in human history, it did lead to many technological advancements in weaponry and chemical warfare. After many months of fighting, the Western Front was essentially at a standstill, dominated only by trench warfare. Soldiers often spent weeks, months, and even years in the trenches, advancing slowly. Every time they would peek their heads up, they would often be shot at. This was the sad reality of trench warfare, and that needed a solution. However, that all changed with the invention of the tank in 1916. The tank quickly became one of the most useful weapons imaginable, countering trench warfare by being able to deal massive damage while also being protected from incoming fire. These advancements, and many other political conflicts between the nations, led to the surrender of Austria-Hungary from the Central Powers, leaving Germany all alone against America, Britain, Russia, and France. Realizing they were defeated, Germany agreed to an armistice, signing the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. While this treaty essentially ended the war, it did require Germany to make many concessions to the Allied powers and left the German economy in an incredibly bad position. The country was required to pay large amounts of money to the Allied powers, leaving the country completely broke and in a state of economic turmoil. This economic turmoil was the perfect climate for a new and more powerful leader to arrive, Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Austria-Hungary. He was a bright student, and after a brief stint in art school, he decided to enlist in the German army during World War I. It was here, in the trenches of World War I, that he encountered the brutalities of war, and years later, in prison, he wrote his book, Mein Kampf, which detailed his struggles and opinions of the German economy and the military after the war. Inspired by his bitterness towards the Allied powers and his discontent with the German economy at the time, he created a new political party, the Nazi Party, which quickly gained traction, and he was eventually appointed as Chancellor in 1933. You probably know what happens from here, but in case you don't, it was here that he pledged to enact his plan to eradicate all of the Jews from Europe, consequently being named Times Person of the Year and starting World War II in 1939. In order to put his plan into action, Germany made an alliance with Italy and Japan, creating the Axis powers, and invaded Poland in 1939. Obviously, this violated the Treaty of Versailles, so the Allied powers were brought back into the war, with Britain and Russia mounting an attack against the Axis powers on both sides. France attempted to help, but they were invaded and then surrendered immediately. Go figure. However, the war quickly escalated in 1941, when after Japan directly attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, the US was roped into the war as well. After many months of drawn-out combat between the two parties, the Allied powers would soon have the upper hand in the conflict. On June 6, 1944, the United States and Great Britain launched the largest amphibious assault in history, the invasion of Normandy Beach. The operation involved 5 assault divisions landing on shore before climbing up Point de Hoc while being gunned by German gunners. Simultaneously, 3 assault divisions, using parachutes and gliders, glided on top of the cliff, thereby getting the upper hand with the Germans. The conflict was one of the deadliest in the war, but eventually the Allies declared victory. The Allies continued to press on after this victory, both from the west, with Russia, and from the east, with the United States and Great Britain. At this point, it seemed that a battle for Berlin was inevitable. On April 30th, 1945, Hitler and his wife killed themselves after it became clear that Germany would lose the Battle of Berlin. However, in America, a whole other war was taking place. After hearing rumors that Germany was developing research into nuclear weapons, the United States of America was at a crossroads. In order to counteract this, the United States began research of their own nuclear weapons in a secret project known as the Manhattan Project in 1942. They commissioned physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer to work on the bomb, and by 1945, the first nuclear bomb was detonated during the Trinity test. This gave the United States a significant advantage in the war against Japan, and while the war was largely over in Europe, the Japanese front was proving far more difficult to the US. The Japanese culture at the time was extremely militaristic, and surrender was seen as the lowest act imaginable. Because of this, forcing the Japanese to surrender seemed almost impossible. On August 6, 1945, just months after the Manhattan Project was completed, President Truman ordered a nuclear bomb to be dropped on Hiroshima, Japan. Shortly afterwards, the city of Nagasaki was also bombed, leaving the Japanese with no choice but to surrender. While this essentially ended the war in Japan, it did leave two cities completely obliterated, and Japan was in a major state of defeat. In 1947, the Paris Peace Treaties were signed, officially ending World War II. World War II resulted in major economic booms for the United States, England, and Russia. However, Germany and Japan were in complete shambles. Because of this, the United States and Russia did what they do best and stepped in. After the treaties, Germany was split into two separate countries, with East Germany belonging to Communist Russia and West Germany belonging to England and the United States. The Berlin Wall was erected in the middle of Berlin, symbolizing the divide between Russia and America that would go on to shape German culture for the next 30 years. America and Russia essentially took control of the German economy, and this led to a lot of controversy. By the 1960s and 1970s, major protest groups became fed up with the Americanization of the culture of West Germany. Because of these protests, many artistic movements emerged all across Germany. Perhaps the most famous out of this era was the German Rebirth movement, often labeled in the West as Krautrock in the 1970s, primarily in Berlin. At the time, it was seen as alien and innovative by many people. Bands like Neu, Kraftwerk, Can, and Faust created unique and creative songs and eventually made their way all the way to the US and England. However, while Krautrock was a very important historical and cultural movement in Germany, its effects could be most potently felt in the people that it influenced. In the late 1970s, English artist David Bowie and producer Brian Eno would move to Berlin to immerse themselves in the Krautrock movement and collaborate on 3 albums. These albums, Low, Heroes, and Lodger, propelled David Bowie to fame across the world and would later become known as the Berlin Trilogy. While Bowie was already an established musician creating many hits, Brian Eno was a different story. Before working with Bowie, Eno was the keyboardist for the band Roxy Music, and after leaving the band due to creative differences with its frontman, decided to embark on his own solo projects. Eno was a groundbreaking musician, combining elements of ambient music and rock music into his landmark album, Another Green World, released in 1975. However, while he was in Berlin, he also began working on his own solo projects. In March of 1978, Brian Eno released his album Ambient No. 1, Music for Airports, which revitalized the ambient genre and found success worldwide. Eno would go on to release 3 more albums in this ambient series, including Ambient 2, The Plateau of Mirror, and Ambient 4, On Land. These albums went on to shape the entire ambient genre as we know it today. However, perhaps their biggest legacy is the effect they had on Japanese culture in the 70s and 80s. While Japan arguably suffered from much more destruction than Germany in World War II, their transition back to independence was slightly smoother than Germany's. While Germany was controlled directly by American troops and officials through martial law, Japan was allowed more leeway and fully implemented democratic ideals into their constitution. What resulted was a period of strong economic growth and reconstruction, thanks to their increase in food production and industrial capabilities. Perhaps the biggest reason for their economic boom, though, was their electronics. As electronics became more accessible in the 1970s, Japan became even more prosperous than they had ever been before. Japanese stores and companies focused on branding more than ever, even commissioning composers to write music to play in their stores. What resulted was the genre of Japanese ambient, based almost entirely on the works of Brian Eno. Seriously, take a listen for yourself. Albums such as Hiroshi Yoshimura's Green became popular among companies, and eventually made their way to the popular culture as well. Of course, this genre served as an effective marketing tactic. However, its legacy can be heard the most in Japanese video games. In 1972, the first commercially successful arcade game, Pong, was released in the United States. Pong propelled Atari to the top of the video game market, and in 1977, Atari released the Atari Video Computer System. This led to many other companies trying to jump into the video game market. However, one company in particular became very popular in Japan. Nintendo had a very troubling history. Originating as a humble playing card company in the 1800s, they served as an entertainment company throughout the 20th century. They made numerous toys and novelties, and at one point even made love hotels. If you don't know what that is, I will let you look that up. In the late 70s, Nintendo sought to capitalize off of the success of arcade cabinets by programming arcade games. One of these programmers was named Shigeru Miyamoto, and in 1980, Nintendo released the first major video game developed by him, Donkey Kong. In the same year, Nintendo released the first portable LCD handheld game console, the Game & Watch. Both of these games were incredibly successful, and by 1986, they released the most powerful video game console ever created, the Nintendo Famicom, or the Nintendo Entertainment System as it became known in the United States. Nintendo quickly became a household name worldwide, with the NES selling almost 70 million units total. Titles such as Super Mario Bros., Duck Hunt, and The Legend of Zelda became some of the best-selling video games of all time when they were released, making Nintendo a brand with real power and cultural relevance. Nintendo stayed on top of the console game for almost 10 years. However, in 1989, another company, Sega, released a competitor, the Sega Genesis. The year after the Genesis released, in 1990, Nintendo released their second console as a competitor to the Genesis, the Super Famicom, or the SNES as it was known in the West, was far more powerful than the Sega Genesis. It even contained rudimentary 3D graphics technology. While the SNES did not sell as much as the NES, it greatly outsold the Genesis worldwide, largely due to its catalog of games, including classics such as Super Mario World, The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, Donkey Kong Country, and Mario Kart, all as original titles. Unfortunately, this supremacy would only last until 1995, when a new competitor, Sony, would release the PlayStation 1. The PlayStation, once again, was far more powerful than the SNES, with full 3D rendering capabilities. The PlayStation became a huge success, selling over 100 million units worldwide, more than any other console at the time. Nintendo tried to combat this by releasing the Nintendo 64 in 1996, but the PS1 vastly outsold the 64. A lot of this is due to how powerful the PlayStation was. While the 64 still used game cartridges, the PS1 used CD-ROM technology, which allowed for more data storage and bigger games. Even though Nintendo had the upper hand when it came to establish original game franchises, the PlayStation appealed to older audiences, with some of the first big, mature-rated video games being released on the PS1. Following the success of the PlayStation 1, in 2000, Sony released the best-selling console of all time, even to this day, the PlayStation 2, which sold over 160 million units and was significantly more powerful than the PS1 and the N64. However, a new competitor entered the competition, once again, through Microsoft's Xbox, released in 2001, which boasted similar specs to the PS2 and was more geared towards older gamers. Nintendo tried to combat this competition by releasing the GameCube later that year, which flopped in comparison compared to the other two consoles. The sixth generation of video game consoles was arguably one of the most competitive in the history of gaming. And even though Nintendo learned from their past mistakes by making the GameCube more powerful than the PS2 when it was released, they clearly could not compete with the specialized hardware of the PlayStation and the Xbox and their older target audience. In need of a comeback, Nintendo turned to a Nintendo of America CEO, Reggie Fils-Aimé. Fils-Aimé was an established businessman with experience serving as the senior director for marketing at Pizza Hut and head of marketing at Guinness Brewing Company. After being hired as CEO of Nintendo of America in 2003, his marketing experience provided valuable insight into Nintendo's strengths and weaknesses when it came to creating video game consoles. Fils-Aimé's idea for the future of Nintendo was to target more casual audiences and families, as more hardcore gamers would likely flock to the Xbox or the PlayStation anyway. He coined this term the Red Ocean strategy, as it pursued uniqueness and originality over what was expected of the industry at the time. This brought Nintendo back to its roots, focusing on fun and family entertainment more than anything else. Nintendo went forward with this strategy, beginning development of the Nintendo Wii shortly after Fils-Aimé joined the company in 2003. In alignment with the Red Ocean strategy, Nintendo came up with the idea of Miis, personal customizable avatars that could be used in gameplay all across the console. The idea of Miis actually goes all the way back to the Nintendo Entertainment System, but Nintendo lacked the technology to pursue it up until this point. Nintendo also designed numerous applications for the Wii that would be included with the console, known as channels. The point of the Wii was to provide an original experience for the user, and these channels represented this very well, even with their own theme music, inspired by Japanese ambient and the works of Brian Eno. The most iconic of these is easily the Mii Channel theme, composed by Kazumi Totaka. Even though the influence by Eno and other Japanese ambient artists has never been directly stated by Totaka, the influence of this genre and the impact it has had over Japanese culture makes it easy to believe that it was. The Nintendo Wii, released in 2006, bundled Wii Sports, which featured a collection of mini-games in which you could play sports as Mii characters. The Wii was a massive success for the company, outselling every other console in its generation with over 100 million units sold, largely due to the popularity of Wii Sports. Players could design their own Miis to be used in the game, but there were also many Miis programmed into the game as CPUs. As players played through the different single-player mini-games, CPUs would get progressively more difficult, with the most difficult being called champions. The most notorious and difficult champion in the entire game, the final boss of the single-player boxing mode, was a Mii known simply as Matt. In early online circles, Matt became somewhat of a meme, with many players recreating him in Mii Maker and making memes about him. These memes gained traction as the internet became more popular in the early 2010s, with the rise of video sharing sites such as YouTube. However, the Miis weren't only limited to Wii Sports. There were many other popular games that were released for the Wii that utilized Mii characters, such as Wii Sports Resort, Wii Play, and Wii Fit, as well as Miitopia and Tomodachi Life on Nintendo's subsequent handheld console, the 3DS. As Nintendo continues to grow, Matt has actually stayed a popular character in the community online. Because of this, he has continued to appear in games in the Wii Sports series, even being included in the 2022 title, Nintendo Switch Sports. However, one of the largest aspects that has driven his popularity, especially today, is nostalgia. In the past few years, the Wii has experienced a resurgence in popularity, especially among Gen Z gamers. Titles like Mario Kart Wii, Super Mario Galaxy, and Wii Sports have developed large online communities in the past few years, with new world records and speedruns being released every single day online. As a Gen Z myself, I fully understand this, and I believe that the biggest contributor to this nostalgia is the Wii's music. Inspired by a long lineage of Brian Eno and Japanese ambient, the music created a sense of nostalgia that inspired an entire generation of gamers, and if it weren't for the music of the Wii, I don't believe the Wii would have been as successful as it was. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what the hell is the point of all this? And I hear you. So, in case you weren't paying attention, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 started a butterfly effect that started 2 world wars, led to the cultural destruction and rebirth of both Germany and Japan, ultimately led to the development of multiple music genres, the entire video game industry as we know it today, the Wii, and ultimately Matt from Wii Sports. Thank you for watching! Seriously though, if you made it to the end and you enjoy this batshit crazy look into the history of Matt from Wii Sports, and you want to see more like it, please like and subscribe as there will be more crazy videos like this one coming out, I guarantee it. Also, if you're at all interested in alternative rock or shoegaze music, I do have a Spotify, so link is in my description and in my profile. I have some new releases coming out that I feel really great about, and if you want to support me, that really would mean the most. But anyway, thank you for watching and see you next time.